Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Farm Journal Field Days Planting Edition. I'm Davis Michaelsen from AgriTalk News and Pro Farmer. We're glad to have you aboard here online, whichever platform you may be watching from. I've got Kirk Hinz from BAM WX with us to talk some weather for planting. Good morning, Kirk. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, sir. I'm good. It's always good to head on into spring. It's hard to believe these planting seasons, they just come and go. It seems like faster every year.
They really do, and I know that we're anxious to get out in the fields, get some field work done, and of course, the number one dictating factor in planting progress is weather, and so now is a very good time to start taking a look at what we can expect, so we can start making plans. I know that there are probably a whole lot of planters parked in machine sheds, getting those updates, those little repairs that maybe we missed last spring or had to get taken care of. So now's a good time. Those of you viewing with us, welcome once again online. You can post comments or questions for Kirk either on the Facebook or the YouTube platform. We'll be sure to see those, and I'll get those to Kirk as we go along here. But start us off, Kirk, in our sort of immediate moment here, and then we'll sort of work our way around the nation. I do want to talk a little bit about El Nino, La Nina. Where are we in that cycle? And then we should probably also discuss South America briefly. But here in my own hometown of Cedar Falls in central Iowa, we were, shall I say, I don't know if blessed is the right word. We were surprised with a late season blanket of snow. We got about 4 or 5, maybe 6 inches.
Yeah.
And it just snowed and snowed. And I know that I'm not alone in looking out my window and seeing some snow. So talk to us about our immediate weather patterns, the near-term forecast, if you would, please.
Yeah, I think you guys may have been even close to that winter storm warning yesterday. So it was crazy little, it's what we call an upper level low pressure system. And a lot of times when those move through this time of the year, they can create two things. They can create like late season snows, especially across the Midwest as it draws in its own cold air. And they can create some severe weather, especially areas from like Texas to the deep South. And that's a good kind of transition because a similar feature, it's not going to be as strong. So we're not anticipating as much wintry weather by any means kind of across the Midwest to Ohio Valley. But as we're going over the next 2 days, another upper level low pressure system is going to make its way across the south central U.S. from west to east. And it's going to bring a 2-day severe weather event kind of starting in Texas and those areas in the southern plains today. And it's going to make its way down to the deep south tomorrow. And especially as we're going into tomorrow, there's an already enhanced a moderate risk for severe weather. And in fact, a tornado outbreak, which is, not something you really throw around lightly because of the implications of that. But, it is that part of the season. And I think that's looking to be increasingly likely on the day tomorrow. So, and interesting, you mentioned, ENSO, La Nina. Oftentimes when you come out of La Ninas and you warm from La Nina, you get springs that are active in severe weather. And we're clearly seeing that already.
Mm-hmm. I may be asking you to fill in the ending part of an oxymoron here, but could you ballpark the bullseye for some of the severe weather that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think especially, the further east you go in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, I think those areas, especially Tuscaloosa, I think all those areas that have grown familiar, I would say, with this time of the year, severe weather down there. Seems like you get some really big tornadoes down there too as well. I think that deep south area, especially Mississippi, Alabama, is going to be into tomorrow that main risk for those areas. Central Eastern Texas as we're going through that area today. So again, multi-day outbreak here. And again, with this pattern generally ahead, split flow jet streams, that's going to be increasingly likely. Southern Plains, deep south going forward.
My local forecasters for about the next week here in the nation's midsection, and I'm talking about basically the same strip that got the snow. Just over the last couple of days, has temperatures warming. And I got to be honest, I didn't even scoop my driveway. I thought it's going to melt off. Why break a sweat for something that's going to melt off? What can we expect that warming trend to continue, or have we got another blast coming yet?
The good news is, I would say good news for about everybody, is that the warming forecast is definitely going to continue. In fact, outside of the regular frontal boundary that comes through, there's not much in terms of a tap of cold air. I mean, in fact, the polar vortex, the core of that is north of Alaska. And oftentimes the saying goes, when you're cold in Alaska, you're warm here in the U.S. And that is a very accurate statement. More than just the next 2 weeks, I think April as a whole is outside of maybe the southern plains that have the low pressure systems that move through those areas. I think the widespread across the grain belt, central plains, northern plains, upper Midwest, Ohio Valley, points east are going to run above normal, maybe even much above normal in temperature. So I think we're going to get a quick start off to a warming pattern the next 4 to 6 weeks easily. So I take that as good news. I'm a warm weather fan. So I'm like, let's bring on the 70s.
I like the sound of that. I like that a lot, Kirk. Once again, Davis Michaelsen for Farm Journal Field Days Planting Edition. Kirk Hinz from BAM WX. Now let's talk about some of the broader patterns. Let's talk about that ENSO pattern. What are we exiting? What are we entering? You talked about that time of transition being a volatile period potentially. Where have we been? Where are we headed?
Yeah, this is a good chance to kind of bring up some of the slides that I have up here as well. And as we do so here, if we can see the slide. So the first slide I'm kind of bringing up here is essentially what we call ENSO evolution. That's El Nino Southern Oscillation. That's how we classify. Is it El Nino? Is it La Nina? Is it neutral? And you can see that the big takeaway up there is called weakening Nina. So the biggest takeaway here, guys, is that we have a body of cool water across the central Pacific equatorial sea surface temperatures area. But you can see to the west or to the left of that, we have some orange colors, some yellow colors here, and that's eroding away La Nina. La Nina is the colder waters here. And like Davis mentioned, the speed at which that happens is essential as we transition from spring to summer. What I mean by that is the quicker transition, years that go back to the most recent years is 2012 that happened like we're coming out of a La Nina and then we warm quickly. That can lead to an active spring, but that can also lead to a turnoff of precipitation in a warmer forecast. So the quicker we get out of La Nina and we warm those bodies of water, we can start wet and we can grow drier. Now, the slower that transition is we can keep the moisture around longer. We can tamper down those temperatures as we go from May, June into July into that time frame. So the speed of that is key. I would say especially that time frame as we're going into that pollination that period, especially 2 to 4 weeks, is going to be absolutely key. So I would say if there's anything we're watching the most closely, it's this: how quickly do we rise those temperatures?
Wow, you've got my attention. Any way to gauge that speed at this point?
Yeah, I would say so. It's rising pretty quickly, and we're seeing that. I mean, look at last week, like you mentioned, areas that have been void of precipitation in a long time, like southern Nebraska, Kansas, widespread rains there, Missouri, Iowa, Ohio Valley, good rain in those areas. We're getting another shot into the later part of the week. We're getting severe weather, more active than the last half decade, I would say, in March. Southern plains, deep south. I mean, we're seeing that clash of air masses when those, the cold air run into the warm air and we get active precipitation. That's a result of that. We're getting more of a jet stream back. And I think we're seeing the signs of that. To answer it pretty simply, I think we are seeing a sign of a more quickly rising ENSO versus a slower one.
And so if I'm hearing you correctly, that tends to point toward, in an average year, in a typical year, let's call it, an active spring, perhaps, wet. I don't know, wetter than normal, or wetter than normal, and then leading to some hot, dry weather later on. Correct.
And if we can still see my screen here. So, and again, I don't want to just hop around too much, but if we're curious, this was what we shared in our webinar last week, and I want to make sure everybody sees it too. In those years, which we are favoring more of the potential where we see ENSO rise quicker, we see a warmer and drier look, especially across the western half of the ag belt. If we're areas we're favoring more of that precipitation response, I would say the eastern half of Texas, deep south, Ohio Valley, eastern Midwest, and points to the east where you can kind of see those low pressure systems rise up into the area. So that is what we're favoring. And I want to make sure that, I know it's not I know it is kind of a bullish forecast if you want to bring it about that way, but given what we're seeing now and a lot of our research in most recent years, I think that this is a good bet. And we got to remember too, like you alluded to, we're very dry in the Western Plains and Northwestern Plains. You can kind of see that's generally where the M/BN on the precipitation on the right, that's much below normal precipitation. We think that's where it can start from, is where we're kind of going into April into May, and grow from further to the east as we're going into June, July, August. So
Okay.
yeah, I think, again, I'm not saying that this is a 2012 by any stretch of the imagination. I know that you wouldn't assert that as well, but I do think warmer and drier risks are on the table here for summer.
Okay. And I said you got my attention, and I did write down your allusion to 2012, but it's good to clarify that perhaps not the exact conditions that we've seen.
Right. And also, just to expand on that, we don't just say it looks like similarities to 2012 just to say it. I mean, it is a very, very close match in how the ocean sea surface temperatures look across the globe. We have the very cool waters. In fact, I can kind of go back here and switch back to my slide here. You can see in the bottom right image, if you guys have the full viewer there, there's some cooler waters southwest of Mexico. That's important because that body of water, that specifically, if that area runs cooler ahead through spring, that signifies a shutoff of the subtropical jet stream, and it is a precursor to a warmer and drier summer. So the fact that we, obviously the 2012 and similar drought years had that feature, and we're seeing a similar feature, it is not the only one, but it is a big teller of what can continue to happen. So if that body of water stays cool, is essentially what I'm saying, that can lead to the warmer and drier risks getting into the summer. So that's why we're watching it so closely, because those conditions are already present.
Right. So you're saying you're watching it very closely. Those conditions are already there, already present. But kind of like with, I imagine, anything in your field, it's not something that we'll really be able to confirm until it's upon us. Fair
Correct.
statement?
Yeah, I very accurate statement. I would say realistically, we'll have a good idea. What is it? Middle part of March. I would say as we're going into May, early May. And then again, I know that's still a month and a half away, but there's a lot of time. A lot of stuff happens in spring, especially when you're going out of a La Nina that's been moderately strong, and you're warming it quickly. A lot can happen. So there's still a few moving puzzle pieces in there. But I would say over the next month and a half, we'll have a much better idea for sure.
Okay, very good. Let's start to dial into some more specific areas. We've got a lot of growers out there from all across the United States and other places as well. And thanks everyone once again for tuning in. I should just throw out you're tuned into Farm Journal Field Days Planning Edition, and we're super glad to have you along. Kirk Hinz from BAM WX is my guest today, and you can throw in your questions, your comments. Just type them into your chat there, either on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll go ahead and get those to Kirk right away.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the most immediate issues when we're thinking about planting, when we're thinking about crop development. Geographically, where do you see the greatest risk right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the greatest risk, and just to paint a picture here, Montana, I would say North Dakota, especially the western half of South Dakota, some areas there into Wyoming, just Western Plains in general, Western Kansas, Eastern Colorado, Western Nebraska, that Western Plains, I guess, is a good way for that. I see problems there of moisture. That's the closest area to where the shutoff of the tap of the jet stream would be in this pattern going ahead. I think that's where that warmer, drier risk can grow from. I see those risks. And that's been a common theme, I think, not just over the past year, but years, over the last half decade. Those areas have grown both warmer and drier. I think that's where there's problem areas there. Maybe on the alternative, some problem areas with too much moisture. I could see some areas in the far southern plains to the deep south, Tennessee Valley, maybe even far southern Ohio Valley, where that active jet stream, the low pressure systems, the strong to severe storms are going to be riding up into those areas more consistently. I'm not seeing anything widespread, like in terms of signals that are saying, hey, planting delays in those areas. But I do think some areas may have a slower trek towards the planting season there as well. In the heart of the area, I would say a good portion of the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, I'm not seeing really any major red flags of, hey, there's planting delays in those areas, which again, that's not a bad sign with the warming forecast ahead. I think as long as you can have good soil moisture in those areas, with the warming forecast, I think we can be planting at a normal pace.
Okay. Move us over to the West Coast.
Yep.
And maybe of a little less concern to farmers, but I guess I'm just sort of curious myself. Potential for wildfires in California, and then talk about the PNW.
Yeah, and that's an area, especially, I can think a good word for it may be bipolar. And like I mentioned, because just west of California and west of Mexico, that's where those waters are the coolest. That's where there's not an active jet stream. And what that simply means to anybody, just a normal person, is that there would be a lack of precipitation. You need an active jet stream, a flow of moisture to bring low pressure systems. And what that alludes to is, a possibly drier forecast in those areas, warmer forecast at times as well. Hard to get consistent moisture. So I do think maybe an elevated fire season out there, especially in California, possible. Alternatively, which is common in La Nina, I think the polar northerly jet stream is going to be a little bit more focused, probably in the PNW, some of the portions of the southern Canadian prairies, just kind of west, east in those areas, I think can have a little bit more of a more favorable jet stream, more moisture tap in those areas. So a little bit more moisture to the north. The further south you go into the West Coast, I think the drier risks can be a real deal.
Talk about the Four Corners area down in the Southwest just a little bit, please.
Yeah, I think almost similar to California, just keeping it as simple as possible. I think with outside of the rogue, low pressure systems, and even if you think about, maybe this is the best way to think about it. I think from a meteorological perspective, it was quite inactive this winter for snowstorms in the Four Corners area and just precipitation in general. That's common with La Nina, and we're still feeling La Nina impacts for the spring in the atmosphere. So I can see a similar scenario continuing in the Four Corners where we're seeing a lack of precipitation in those areas especially. So I would tend to favor more of that solution, a lack of precipitation to get going into the spring.
You and I talked briefly last week, and I had mentioned that we'd heard from a farmer in Mississippi who was putting seed in the ground on the 10th. We're here on March 16. That's 6 days ago.
It's wild.
To an Iowa boy, that seems horribly, tragically early.
Yeah.
But for Mississippi, that's right on time.
Yeah.
Southeastern farmers can expect what sort of conditions?
Wet. I think we're talking wet, and in just like the short term, active weather, moisture moving into those areas, very common with the La Nina atmosphere. I would favor that. I would multiple moisture chances per week in those areas for April into May. I think that's probably a good bet in those areas. Just think active, multiple chances of precipitation. That would be an area, and again, I don't want to say this lightly, but in terms of the Deep South, that would be where thinking closely about planting early may be a little bit riskier in those areas. Again, like you said, maybe that's not early down there, but it poses a bigger risk with an elevated precipitation forecast.
So I believe you're saying plant hay while the sun shines in the southeast. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Fair enough.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. I want to get to the Midwest and to the Eastern Belt. But take us up to the northeastern area just a little bit, because I can't help but think about natural gas demand. It's been a huge story.
Yeah.
And how much longer is their home heating season going to last? Are they about through it now?
Yeah, I would definitely think so. Our forecast, I would say, especially as we're going into late March and April, is quite warm in the Northeast. So, yeah, I think the answer is I do think we are wrapping up that heating demand season in those areas. If we're going to hang on to maybe a little bit longer, Southern Plains, Texas, those areas where we're seeing a little bit more active precipitation risks. But Northeast, I think we're definitely favoring more of a warmer response ahead.
Okay, very good. Eastern Belt, let's start making our way back westward here. Ohio, Indiana, that sort of area there. What are we expecting for planting season?
Yeah, I think Nothing substantial kind of speaks out to me about precipitation right now. I think the further east, we're going to favor more eastern Indiana, Ohio, eastern Kentucky, those areas, better precipitation chances closer to where that active flow of moisture is going to be. There is a little area, if you look at a drought monitor map, north central Illinois, north central Indiana, and I've talked to quite a few guys in those areas that are like, we're dry 3 to 4 feet deep, when putting in our tiles in. There is a concern in those areas that could have at times some drier risks. But I want to say, with the upper level low pressure systems like we just saw and what's in the forecast, later Wednesday into Thursday this week, that's where the core of that precipitation is looking to set up. So I think some improvement in those areas is going to happen, which is good news for those farmers in those areas. So that's why I say I'm not seeing anything stick out for drier risks here locally in the Ohio Valley, because we have been getting some timely precipitation lately.
All right, very good. And let's finish up running the table here. Take me to my backyard here in central Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, perhaps even up into the Dakotas, Nebraska, Missouri sort of area. What have you got for us?
Yeah, I think drawing from like the Dakotas, northern half of Minnesota, we could see probably a little bit below normal response into the upper Midwest. I do think we're not done with these upper level low pressure systems for areas like Kansas and eastern Kansas into eastern Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri. I think that can be something that's in the forecast probably over the next 2 to 4 weeks. So I think moisture chances are, I would say, more increasingly likely than normal in those areas because of the split flow jet stream pattern that we have. So I'm not seeing, especially in Iowa, Missouri, eastern Nebraska, eastern Kansas, I'm not seeing a major red flag for dryness in those areas versus further to the west, which is a little bit different ballgame.
Okay. So let's just make some general comments about all that we've just discussed here. Tell me if I'm hearing this correctly. It sounds like if I have not yet moved my planter into the machine shed for pre-plant maintenance, I probably need to do so now, because when I've got opportunities to get out and get some field work done, I probably need to get at it no matter where I'm at, because there is a chance for some soggy conditions.
Yeah, I would think generally, and the warming forecast in general, I think that would lend to, hey, in the past there have been planting delays and we've had a slower start. I'm not seeing a similar scenario right now in a lot of the areas. I think we can get going. I mean, I think we need to start thinking about it for sure. I would definitely say, let's get them in the shed. Let's do the maintenance on them. Let's really start thinking about a game plan of like when we want to put it in the ground.
Yep. And then, as we discussed, perhaps at least a measure of risk for a hotter, drier pattern generally across the Midwest.
Yeah, let's the analogy I like to use is like, let's get the moisture while we can. This is good. This is great moisture for a lot of areas that really need it in the Central Plains. I've talked to a lot of folks who are just like, these are heavenly rains because it's been 12, 18 months without any good moisture. So that's a great thing. Let's take them while we can, because like I said, when we're rising ENSO quickly, that favors a more active period. A lot of people don't remember, 2012 was not dry, not super dry in the spring, if you look at an anomaly map. So, take the reins. I'm saying it lightly. Let's take the reins while we can get them, so we can have just as much buffer as possible.
Outstanding. Any final thoughts? Because I want to move on to South American weather too. Anything else? What did we miss?
No, I think we've got a good encompassing area. So just if you follow our Twitter, follow Farm Journal, anybody, if you hear the keyword ENSO or rising or slowly or La Nina or El Nino, I would say pay closer attention than normal, because again, like I said, we'll be touching on this often in our forecast. The speed of that is absolutely key. So keep close eyes on that for sure.
Kirk Hinz, let's take a moment for a shameless plug. Throw your Twitter out there, and where can they get more from BAMWX?
Yeah, you can follow me at Met_K Hinz as well, or our official company BAMWX.com. That's for all Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. Follow us on there, or we have a new platform, Weather Porthole, PORTHOLE.com. Awesome new app and everything platform on there as well that really geared towards farmers, and we just love helping people, fixing problems, and that's our business motto. So I appreciate everybody having us on here for sure, and this is our passion. We love it.
Yeah. And the gang at BAM WX does a great job, focused on agriculture, focused on the weather, and focused on the information that really matters the most to farmers. And we've always found you guys to be very insightful and
Appreciate that.
most of the time correct as far as weathermen go. I mean,
I try, I'm not
that's
perfect.
great.
I try to be right every now and then,
Sure.
it helps grow the following on the social media.
Understood.
On seriously though, we appreciate you guys having us on every week. It's a great platform for us to be able to help people because we're in the helping people business. And, just let people know that you can get the weather right more than 50% of the time. So that's our goal. That's our serious goal.
Right. Well, Farm Journal Field Days Planning Edition rolls on. Let's turn our attention southward to South America. It's over the past, I don't know, several weeks, month and a half, maybe 2 months, we've been watching some dry conditions. It's dry here. Well, now it's too wet there. What is it looking like currently, and what do we expect moving forward as they're out in the fields?
Let's kind of start north to south. So I want to start in central Brazil, soybean areas. So soybean, and then the second crop, safrinha corn crop there. So couple key takeaways. We had a record late planting for one, very, very hot and dry. So we already started the season 2 to 4 weeks behind in central Brazil. Lately, it's been absolutely soaked down there. Flooding rains for an already late season. Now we're at the back end of the season harvesting, and now it's soaked. A lot of soybeans were underwater, deteriorating conditions in terms of the pods and everything down there. So things are improving in terms of lessening rain, but it is not dry yet. Drier forecast ahead, but it is not dry yet. Still wet this week, which means that still a planting delay, or I would say a harvest delay of getting the beans out, which means the second crop, safrinha corn crop, is delayed in getting in. So it's all kind of intertangled. Wet forecast in the short term. I think we can get the beans out with a drier forecast to end March and into April. But then the key takeaway is for the second crop, safrinha corn crop, do we grow too dry into April and May? So definitely weather worth watching for the next 2 weeks, especially in central Brazil. I don't think we're done with an easy forecast down there by any means. Alternatively, and especially as we're going into Argentina, it's a year that's been very similar to 17 and 18. And if you don't remember what that was like, it was a very bad drought for Argentina in those areas. I think it was like the worst drought in the last 40 to 50 years in those areas. Now, it hasn't been to that extent, but it has been very similar at times, especially the last 6 to 8 weeks where we've been very dry in a lot of those areas in an important time for the corn down there, especially. Lately, we've gotten a little bit of rainfall yesterday, and there's a little bit of shot of rainfall there today, but with the forecast is returning back to dry to end March and to go into April. So the question now is are these rains that are working in now, are they just too late? And again, no way to know that from a weather perspective, they seem late. I'm not an agronomist or anything, but we have been very void of precipitation the last 2 months. I am concerned based on weather that there may be issues there.
Okay, very good. Completely unfair of me to do this because we didn't talk about it ahead of time, but
Sure.
I've heard some rumblings that it's awfully dry up in the Canadian prairies.
Yes.
Any idea what's going on there? Is there any relief? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and that goes similarly to like where I mentioned in the Northwestern Plains, Montana, those areas. It's directly connected to the Canadian prairies. We have that area still below normal for precipitation in May and April. Not to say there can't be a couple timely shots of rain, but I would be lying if I say I was not concerned with how dry we already are in those areas. It's easy to continue a pattern like that from April, May into the growing season. So I would say I have an elevated concern that similar style conditions may linger in those areas. So it's concerning. I would say I'm concerned. We would need to see a slower progression of that ENSO rise to increase those rains in those areas. That's why I say it's so key, because the speed of that, it can keep what's going on. If we rise it quick, it can keep what's going on and expand it. If we slow it down, it can allow more moisture to build into the area and things can improve. So gut says we may have problems in those areas as we go forward.
All right. Well played. I completely sprung that one out.
That's okay.
That's awesome.
I tried to be prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. So near term, some severe weather potential in the Southland. Otherwise, a general warming trend heading towards a potentially wet spring in certain areas. And then again, potential for some hot and dry weather, depending on the speed of that ENSO
Yep.
transition, is what we're
Yep.
hearing from Kirk Hinz
Absolutely.
from BAMWX. Um, if there's nothing further, any final thoughts for us?
I'm excited. I get excited every spring in terms of going into the season. This is an interesting scenario because it's been a while. We've been kind of stuck in an El Nino pattern the last almost 3 years. So coming from a La Nina into this territory, it's just different kind of weather. So as a weather nerd myself, I am very intrigued of how the weather's going to respond ahead. So I think there's going to be a lot of intriguing weather patterns ahead. The market's playing very close to how the weather pattern is in South America, North America. So I think it's going to be an elevated thing that everybody is going to be glued to over the next 3 to 6 months. So it makes my job, I just more passionate about it, helping people and just trying to be more accurate. So I would say if there's any year to pay closest attention to the weather in recent memory, this would be a good year.
Dude, you really love what you do, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
we all do. Our team is super passionate. We're big weather nerds over here.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Well, when you want to know the weather and you want it to be as close to correct as a
Right.
weatherman can make it, a weather nerd's the guy for the job.
That's right. That's right.
Outstanding. Well, for Farm Journal Field Days Planning Edition, I'm Davis Michaelsen from AgriTalk and Pro Farmer, Kirk Hinz from BAMWX. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Your insights have been terrific and very helpful to us. Now we can kind of get an idea of what we've got to look forward to,
Yep.
what we need to do today to get ready for planting as that looms in our very near future here. Kirk Hinz, thank you so much, man. Have a great day.
Absolutely. You guys as well.
Thanks for joining us on Farm Journal Field Days Planting Edition. Davis Michaelsen from AgriTalk and Pro Farmer signing off.